I should like Snuggies instead as a comfort blanket. Instead, I like Lorraine shorts, which is a problem.
The rings.
What? Sorry, we're not serious today. For me, wardrobe is always the way that I enter a character. I'm a very shy person. So if I look a certain way, then I can escape into that. Like and stuff today. I don't dress like this in real life, but like I'm having to like do interviews and talk. So I'm going to wear like a crazy pattern, really crazy rings. Also are like my comfort blanket. It's just a very expensive comfort blanket.
Blake Lively's legal storm has taken another sharp twist, and the intensity behind every filing feels like a high-stakes chess match where the smallest move could redefine everything. This week alone, motions and counter-motions collided like waves in a courtroom battle, from sanctions to dismissals to an omnibus motion to compel, each carrying weighty implications that cut deep into the heart of her fight. What makes it more gripping is how Wayfair struck back, coolly dismissing much of her request as unnecessary, arguing that most of the material she demanded was already set to be delivered, while Blake, refusing to back down, escalated with a supplemental list stretching nearly 9 months beyond her lawsuit start, demanding transparency, control, and accountability. Yet Wayfair pushed back hard, framing her demands as excessive, questioning why discovery should stretch further unless she, too, opened her own records, and in this charged clash of persistence versus resistance. The tension isn't just about legal filings, it's about power, exposure, and who will ultimately control the narrative, leaving us all suspended in the question of whether Blake's relentless pursuit will yield triumph or collapse under the weight of resistance. And just when it seemed things couldn't get more complicated, new layers of drama started unfolding behind the scenes. The court isn't only dealing with paperwork anymore, it's about timing, strategy, and pressure building on both sides. Blake's team is determined to show that Wayfair is holding back, while Wayfair insists they've already provided what's fair and necessary. This back and forth is creating delays, frustration, and a sense that neither side is willing to step down. What makes it even more intense is the clock ticking. Every extra month drags Blake deeper into legal costs, media speculation, and emotional stress. For her, this battle is not just about documents, it's about proving she's strong enough to confront a giant corporation that seems unwilling to bend. Every new filing feels like another chapter in a legal thriller, and with both sides refusing to compromise, the question isn't if this will escalate further, it's how explosive the next round will be. Wayfair's silence on why Blake Lively should release those materials left their stance shaky, yet the judge still handed them a narrow win, ruling that much of what Blake demanded was already promised and that her push was premature. He confirmed Wayfair must deliver the agreed documents by a set deadline, effectively closing that dispute. But when Blake sought sweeping access to every current Wayfair record, the judge firmly rejected it, stressing that her request reached far beyond the scope of her original claims and that anything happening now was no longer tied to a smear campaign but instead reflected Wayfair's ongoing defense in active litigation, marking a critical shift in momentum and raising the stakes for what comes next in this relentless battle. After that ruling, the energy inside the case shifted, and both legal teams knew the fight was far from over. Blake's attorneys quickly regrouped, determined to prove that Wayfair's tactics were nothing more than calculated moves to delay and weaken her position. On the other side, Wayfair's lawyers doubled down, using every technical detail to block her attempts at gaining wider access. This constant tug-of-war created a tense atmosphere where every new filing felt like a power play. What makes it even more gripping is how public perception is starting to matter. Media outlets are watching closely, fans are debating online, and every update sparks new waves of speculation. For Blake, this isn't just about evidence anymore, it's about reputation, resilience, and showing. She won't be silenced no matter how heavy the opposition becomes. With both sides digging in deeper, the next steps could be more dramatic than anything seen so far, pushing the case into uncharted territory. The judge made it absolutely clear that Blake Lively cannot twist the narrative by insisting that every action Wayfair takes in response to this active lawsuit amounts to a smear campaign, shutting down that argument while firmly establishing a February deadline for what could be considered valid discovery. In his written order, he turned to the critical second question: how far should discovery stretch? Lively wanted access extending to the present, covering roughly 9 months since her CRD complaint, but Wayfair countered that the fair cutoff should be February 18th, the date she filed her amended complaint, citing proportionality, relevance, and overbreadth. The court sided with Wayfair, reasoning that while the requested materials do hold some value, that relevance fades as time drifts further from the core allegations. He emphasized that newer documents would more likely reflect litigation defense rather than evidence of harassment or defamation. Put simply, her claims of ongoing harm earned a limited extension, but endless discovery was rejected, especially since her smear campaign allegations dangerously overlap with active advocacy. Following that decision, the atmosphere around the case grew even more tense, as both parties tried to spin the ruling in their favor. Blake's camp viewed the judge's acknowledgement of limited relevance as proof that her claims carried weight, while Wayfair's side celebrated the cutoff date as a major safeguard against what they called endless fishing for evidence. Behind the legal arguments, the pressure mounted, because every deadline now feels like a ticking clock counting down to the next explosive clash. Supporters of Blake argue that she is fighting against a corporate machine skilled at hiding behind procedure, while critics believe she is stretching her claims too far. The media spotlight only intensifies the drama, turning every small update into headline news. For Blake, the stakes are not just legal but deeply personal, as her credibility and resilience are questioned with each filing. And with emotions running high, the battle ahead promises to be even more unpredictable. At the core of this case, the judge delivered a decisive ruling, telling Blake Lively that February 18th stands as the absolute deadline for her to argue that an ongoing smear campaign existed, a firm cutoff that locks her access to documents within that window and nothing beyond. After her amended complaint, every move Wayfair made was deemed legitimate defense rather than targeted defamation. By stressing that Brian Friedman and his team were entitled to zealously defend their clients in the public arena, especially when negative press could poison jury perception, the court underscored the fine line between advocacy and misconduct. In his written order, he warned that demanding 9 more months of discovery would impose a crushing burden while sweeping in irrelevant and distracting materials outside the true scope of the case. Thus, each side was ordered to answer the detailed requests for production only through February 18th and provide a full privilege log, ensuring accountability without unleashing endless discovery battles. With that ruling in place, the courtroom drama only grew more intense, setting the stage for fresh arguments and sharper strategies from both sides. Blake's legal team began to prepare for the next phase, determined to frame the judge's cutoff date as a narrow victory for Wayfair but not a complete loss for her. Meanwhile, Wayfair's attorneys took the decision as confirmation that the court saw her broader claims as overreaching, and they used this momentum to strengthen their defense. What makes this moment even more gripping is how every deadline now carries enormous weight. Each filing, each response, could shift public opinion and influence the eventual outcome. Outside the courtroom, the media continued to amplify the story, portraying it as a battle between celebrity influence and corporate power. For Blake, the challenge is no longer just about documents, but about proving resilience under pressure, showing her supporters she is unwilling to retreat despite the mounting obstacles. With respect to documents filed after Lively's complaint, the judge made it clear that if there are communications between Wayfair, its attorneys, or its executives, they can shield them through a privilege log, meaning Blake gets no access. The court further stressed that when it comes to the additional HR complaint she demanded, only allegations directly involving Wayfair, Jamie Heath, or Justin Baldwin tied specifically to sexual harassment or discrimination are fair game, while unrelated claims, such as other forms of workplace bias, are strictly off-limits. It's worth recalling that there had once been a racial discrimination feud which ultimately collapsed and was dismissed, leaving no weight in the case. Thus, unless Wayfair holds actual HR records showing harassment claims connected to her allegations, she gets nothing. Adding to that, her attempt to frame powerhouse attorney Brian Friedman as an agent of Wayfair instead of strictly their lawyer failed. The judge refused to expand discovery and firmly ruled that if she wants more, she must request the official client file directly from Wayfair, which may or may not include privileged material. The striking impact of this decision is that it shuts down the idea of any ongoing smear campaign. If the internet criticizes Blake or public discussions unfold about her litigation, the court views it not as malicious defamation but as fair commentary on active federal proceedings. This ruling also sparks a deeper question. Could subpoenas against content creators, once seen as a weapon to silence opinion, now face strict limitations given the judge's stance? That content creator still discussing the case raises a powerful question. How could it ever be framed as a smear campaign when Blake's lawsuit was filed in December 2024, and commentary dates back as far as August 2023? The timeline alone shatters that narrative, and I actually find that significant because it creates a clear cutoff where Lively can no longer claim smear tactics stretching into August 2024 or 2025, which removes a major weapon from her arsenal. But this battle doesn't end there, because the second twist involves none other than celebrity blogger Perez Hilton. Reports from my community and Instagram followers say Perez appeared devastated after court in Nevada, his energy crushed as the hearing was deferred, leaving questions swirling about what truly unfolded. Yet the bigger headline is that Judge Lyman dismissed Lively's attempt to argue Perez had waived personal jurisdiction simply by filing for a protective order against her subpoena. She tried painting it as him willingly subjecting himself to that court's authority, much like her prior tactic against Jed Wallace, whose own jurisdiction fight led to one dismissal and another pending motion. But this time, the judge firmly declared there is no jurisdiction over Perez Hilton. That ruling is explosive, because Perez is not just another name, he's one of the biggest digital creators Blake has set her sights on, and the court's refusal to bind him marks a massive setback for her legal strategy. Adding even more intrigue, yesterday Megyn Kelly shocked her audience by revealing she, too, has been pulled into Blake's escalating storm. And what makes this development even more fascinating is how quickly it's pulling other high-profile voices into the spotlight. Megyn Kelly's revelation stunned her audience because it highlighted just how far-reaching Blake's actions are becoming, stretching well beyond Perez Hilton and directly into the world of mainstream media personalities. This creates a ripple effect, where every new name attached to the case not only intensifies public curiosity but also adds more pressure to the narrative unfolding in court. For audiences in the US, UK, and Canada, this isn't just about legal filings. It's about power, influence, and the battle between celebrities and the creators who dare to challenge them. The more Blake expands her reach, the more it risks backfiring, because every attempt to silence or control voices only sparks louder conversations online. And with each ruling against her strategies, the courtroom drama turns into a public showdown that feels bigger than one person. It feels like a fight over freedom of speech itself. Well, despite Blake's aggressive push to seize Megyn Kelly's contacts tied to her podcast, YouTube, and other media platforms, she came away empty-handed, because Megyn fiercely refused to surrender anything connected to her confidential sources. As a recognized member of the press, with a career that spans NBC and Fox News, her credentials as a journalist are indisputable, making Blake's attempt to discredit her utterly futile. Megyn stressed that her perspective was formed independently, after carefully analyzing court filings, reviewing evidence, and recognizing where certain claims began collapsing under scrutiny. She explained that she entered this matter with neutrality, holding no bias against Bellin or Blake, but as both a lawyer and seasoned journalist with over 30 years of experience, she concluded that Blake's allegations lacked credibility, and her conclusion had nothing to do with the fact that Brian Friedman had once represented her long before his ties to Justin Baldoni. This targeting of Megyn raises another question. Was Billy Bush drawn into Blake's reach as well, given his name surfaced in filings and RFPs, even though he has yet to comment? Megyn made it clear Blake gained nothing from her, which makes Perez Hilton the unpredictable wild card, especially when considering that Candace Owens remains unresolved and Andy Sr. of Popcorn Planet is still fighting a pending motion to quash. Yet in New York, Judge Lyman drew the line, declaring no jurisdiction over Perez, which means the court cannot compel him to produce documents or comply with Blake's discovery demands, slamming the door on yet another one of her strategies. What makes this entire situation even more dramatic is how it exposes the fragile balance between celebrity influence and the growing power of digital voices. Every failed attempt to silence creators or journalists only strengthens the idea that public opinion cannot be controlled in courtrooms. The involvement of high-profile names like Perez Hilton, Megyn Kelly, and possibly Billy Bush signals that this story is no longer just about Blake's personal battle. It's about a cultural clash over free speech, accountability, and reputation in the age of social media. For viewers, it feels like watching a live drama where every legal twist adds new tension, and every ruling sparks bigger questions about who truly holds the power: the celebrities with money and lawyers, or the creators with platforms and audiences. As this unfolds, it's clear the stakes keep climbing, and the outcome could set a precedent that changes how public figures confront criticism in the digital world. The judge emphasized that Lively never proved the discovery she demanded from Perez had any link to his contacts within the forum state, instead arguing he had somehow consented to personal jurisdiction or waived objections. But Perez consistently and firmly rejected that claim, and the court agreed, noting that while he filed motions to seal and redact his personal details or request continuances, those actions did not equate to submitting himself to litigation over the subpoena's merits. Protecting personal information does not mean surrendering fundamental legal rights, and the judge made clear those filings did not constitute waiver. Lively also argued that Perez's motion for a protective order was itself a waiver, but the court rejected that too, ruling it merely sought to stop her from issuing further subpoenas, not to concede jurisdiction. Even his later filings, which touched on the merits of the subpoena, were understood as alternative arguments, not an abandonment of his defense. Courts have long held that an individual can argue both jurisdiction and substance simultaneously without forfeiting either, and Perez's pro-se status only strengthened the court's reluctance to strip him of those protections. Ultimately, the judge declared that the court lacked jurisdiction over Perez and denied Lively's motion to compel, issuing the order without prejudice, sparking debate but delivering a decisive blow to her aggressive strategy. What the judge essentially declared is that this battle is over in New York. His court holds no jurisdiction over Perez, making the case legally dead there. If Blake wants to pursue it further, she must shift the fight to Nevada, the only proper venue, since the subpoena itself requires compliance in Las Vegas. Perez already filed his motion to quash in Nevada, and that court deferred a ruling while waiting for clarity from New York, leaving another pivotal hearing set for the 2nd, where the decision will center on whether the subpoena survives or collapses. In Nevada, Perez is asserting his rights as a journalist, protected by powerful reporters' privilege laws, and those protections could prove to be his strongest shield. That's why Perez celebrated this win, knowing the legal ground is far stronger there. Blake's attempt to force a waiver of jurisdiction completely failed, and the cracks in her strategy are widening. And looking at Jed Wallace's pending motion to dismiss, the signs point in the same direction. Lively still hasn't met the burden to prove jurisdiction, and the judge may very well throw that complaint out too. Her desperate request to sever him and transfer the case to Texas feels more like a stalling tactic, a way to keep Wallace tangled longer even though she has no solid claim against him. So while Blake has managed to scrape together minor victories in discovery, these mounting defeats reveal a strategy unraveling before everyone's eyes. Another layer to this story is how every failed attempt seems to turn the spotlight back on Blake in ways she may not have expected. Instead of silencing her critics, the ongoing legal twists are giving more attention to the very voices she hoped to quiet. Audiences are following every move, comparing rulings, and questioning why so much energy is being spent on battles that appear to have little chance of success. At the same time, creators and journalists are growing bolder, openly discussing the risks and standing firm on their rights, knowing that courts are leaning in their favor. This dynamic is transforming the case into something larger than a personal dispute. It's becoming a public lesson on power, free expression, and the limits of control in the digital world. Each dismissal and delay only deepens curiosity, keeping viewers hooked on what new revelation might surface next, and whether Blake can survive the mounting pressure. She's also taken some major setbacks, and that's the unpredictable nature of discovery, because while Wayfair was forced to release certain documents, they also secured crucial victories, with the court drawing a clear line that no smear campaign exists beyond February 18th. In many ways, it feels like Blake is finally being restrained, placed under strict boundaries, with the judge unwilling to indulge endless claims of reputational sabotage. This ruling could carry serious weight for Perez Hilton and other high-profile creators, because if she cannot demand records past Th.